Rachel Carson is considered to be one of the founding mothers of ecofeminism after writing her book Silent Spring. She started a chain of reactions and ideas that have been influencing our world since 1962. Rachel starts her book by talking about how there was a town in America where everything was living together happily. The harmony is soon disrupted when living things start to die, trees don't blossom, and eggs don't hatch. She states her concern about the chemicals used in pesticides, quote, "These sprays, dusts, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes, non-selective chemicals that have the power to kill every insect, the good and the bad." She says that pesticides are dangerous because they don't just kill the insect affecting the crop, but many other animals in the ecosystem. For example, the earthworms feeding off the leaves of the sprayed crop then become contaminated in the chemicals of the pesticide, along with the birds that will eat that worm. Rachel makes the point that we are actually affecting a lot more animals than we may realize when we use these harmful chemicals to spray crops.
Humans have caused devastating effects to the harmony that once existed throughout Earth's vibrant ecosystems. Carson emphasizes the interconnectedness of nature in looking at plant life. Quote, "The Earth's vegetation is a part of a web of life in which there are intimate and essential relations between plants and earth, between plants and other plants, between plants and animals." To shore up this argument, although it should be seen as scientific fact, she discusses the sagebrush lands of the West and describes the balanced ecosystem that was once created between the sage and the animals that lived there. The sage is a stable food source during the winter months for animals such as the pronghorn antelope, mule deer, and sheep. Carson explains, quote, "Where all other plants have shed their leaves, the sage remains evergreen, meaning without the sage, these forms won't have a dependable food source. These organisms, the sage and the animals, depend on one another to maintain a balanced ecosystem that has existed for a long time. The vital sagebrush that is lost was a valuable resource for the animals that inhabit the area, and surely they cannot survive without it. Humans need to recognize that we are embedded within the complex system of nature, and the simple extermination of even one organism or geological structure can have detrimental effects for years to come."
Rachel Carson's main concern was the environment, though. DDT is not only killing the insects that it is intended for, but it is killing birds and other animals as well. By killing these animals, it throws off the entire food chain. By birds dying as an effect of pesticides, for example, the animals that hunt birds as prey could potentially die as well because they would then also have the pesticide and poison in their system. Even in killing the insects that the pesticide was intended for, it is detrimental to the way that the insects are vital to the ecosystems. Carson says, in each of these situations, one turns away to ponder the question, who has made the decision that sets in motion these chain of poisonings, this ever-winding wave of death that spreads out? Who has decided, who has the right to decide for the countless legions of people who were not consulted that the supreme value is the world without insects, even though it might also be a sterile world ungraced by the curving wing of a bird in flight? The decision is that the authoritarian temporarily entrusted with power, he has made it during a moment of inattention by millions.
In my own backyard, I see the effects of pesticide pollution on the environment and specifically in water sources. The Ohio River, which runs along 6 states, is number 1 in the nation for toxic discharge. This river is important for supplying water, bringing in tourists, providing entertainment, and sometimes serving as a source of food. Yet posted signs along the river warn about consumption, and even the local communities understand that there is something unsafe about the water. Additionally, many of the communities along the river are racial minority populations, a fact that reinforces the idea of environmental racism. Environmental racism refers to any environmental policy, practice, or directive that differentially affects or disadvantages, whether intended or unintended, individuals, groups, or communities based on race or color. The river is a toxic dump for chemicals and major waterway for small flowing waters. Columbus Dispatch states that fertilizers from farms contribute to the toxic pollution because the rainstorms wash the chemicals into the river. In addition, few regulations about the washing and dumping of chemicals into the river exist. Obviously, pesticides continue to invade the environment despite Rachel Carson's motivating work to end the poisonings. Unfortunately, because of the government's lack of initiative, the Ohio River remains extremely toxic to animals and humans along the water.
According to the Natural Resource Defense Council, deodorant is sorted in fat and leaves the body very slowly. Deodorant was used from 1950 to 1974 to control insects in cotton, corn, and crop. After that, scientists realized that deodorant has harmful effect on human, fish, and wildlife. Therefore, deodorant were banned in 1987 in the United States. Deodorant is coming of our environment from pesticides, and it's used by agriculture in soil to control of mosquitoes and flies. Deodorant has low influence of human and animal because it stay in fat of human body. Human could exposure of pesticide in some way, which are eating polluted fish, flow, beef, or other food grown up in treated soil. Therefore, chemical arrive to our body in different way, and people should take a lot of education for human to understand this hidden risk. According to Carson, the fact that every meal we eat carries its load of chlorinated hydrocarbons is the inevitable consequence of the most universal spraying or distinct of agricultural crops with the poisons. We have to know that not only the insect and animal could be affected by spraying pesticide, but also we could have the same poisons in our body. For example, the meat that we eat every day, it could have an influence by poisons because the animal exposed to the springs with such eating beef. Therefore, we have to keep in our mind that that they are completed to not worry about food that had covered from chemical remains are growing in our bodies. Therefore, farmers need some of spraying to protect their crops, so they should be aware of using insecticides. Therefore, farmers should not use a higher dose than recommended.
From an ecofeminist perspective, Carson's documentation of pesticide effects on humans was missing a key component: the effects felt by farmers, spraymen, and field hands. Due to socioeconomic conditions, this group was exposed to disproportionately large quantities compared to the general population. Though briefly mentioned by Carson, this group made their addition to the anti-pesticide movement after the publication of Silent Spring. Organizations like the United Farm Workers of California, UFWOC, and subsequent movements such as the DiGiorgio and Schenley grape boycott gave a bullhorn to these workers. The origins of the UFWOC and how the demand for social justice, which includes pay raises, shorter hours, better overall working conditions, and environmental justice, compensation for pesticide poisoning, more regulations, and the enforcement of those regulations, were argued for and achieved in tandem with environmental justice. In the late 1960s, partly due to the actions of the UFWOC, the regulatory situation began to change. Initial investigations by the government made the public aware of what many farm workers already knew: pesticides cause health issues. The California Department of Public Health conducted a door-to-door survey which revealed 80% of the 774 workers interviewed suffer from symptoms of pesticide poisoning. UFWOC leader Cesar Chávez coupled disturbing statistics such as this with anti-pesticide propaganda pertaining to how the pesticides present on produce could affect consumers similarly. Though criticized by some, the connection of the workers and consumers to a common concern, pesticides, did not detract from the importance of the other grievances of farm workers. In fact, this flyer proves that the UFW saw the struggle for social and economic justice to be one and the same as the struggle for environmental justice. Though not explicitly labeled, this statement could coexist as a possible ecofeminism dogma. Many female scholars don't identify as feminist or ecofeminist, yet their work still contributes to these disciplines. One such woman, Tiffany Dyer, a historian, says, that often lower-class oppressed peoples have been the most exposed to environmental degradation, and that the same systems of power that oppress them are the systems that are often responsible for vast environmental degradation.
People have begun trying to control nature with science, but nature has a power of its own. There is a balance in nature. With every action comes a consequence. In The Violence of the Green Revolution by Vandana Shiva, she states, quote, "The tragic story of Punjab is a tale of the exaggerated sense of modern science's power to control nature and society, and the total absence of a sense of responsibility for creating natural and social situations which are totally out of control." In her book, Shiva talks about how the Green Revolution revolved around the theory that technology is a superior substitute for nature, allowing us to have growing seasons year-round without the limits of nature. Shiva states, quote, "It has been argued that the Green Revolution provided the only way in which India, and indeed the rest of the Third World, could have increased food availability." Shiva recorded that the total crop growth was higher during this time than the rates from previous years. And in conclusion, Shiva states that the Green Revolution was a failure. Quote, "It has led to reduced genetic diversity, increased vulnerability to pests, soil erosion, water shortages, reduced soil fertility, micronutrient deficiencies, soil contamination, reduced availability of nutritious food crops for the local population, the displacement of vast numbers of small farmers from their land, rural impoverishments, and increased tension and conflict. The European Crop Protection argues that with year-round fruits and vegetables, our diets will be richer and reduce cancers, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases, while failing to mention the cancers caused by the pesticides needed to create these year-round foods."
There needs to be a major consumer pushback in order to create change. Consumers need to change their habits. They should strive to support their local market. This way, the whole community benefits. The consumers know who the farmers are. The farmers are not under pressure to purchase modified seeds annually, and the finances stay in the local sphere. Local organic produce decreases the risk of unknown long-term side effects of foods infected with pesticides and does not contribute to the system that willingly lies to the public as they poison them. It is a great source of economic circulation in the community, as well as much more diverse and seasonal. Food is meant to be nutritious, seasonal, and diverse, not monocultured, aesthetic-driven, and harmful. Though cliché, Gandhi's famous words ring especially true in this situation. Be the change you wish to see in the world.